Hello, friends. I'm Maureen Lee Maloney, and welcome to the very first episode of my doc journey. This is the show where I set myself up for abject humiliation if I fail to successfully create my very first feature documentary. Yay! Seriously, though, this show is meant to give people an insight into the process of creating a documentary film, which I am currently undergoing. And so I'll be giving updates each week about basically what I accomplished that week or what I totally and completely failed at. A little about me. I am a biologist turned filmmaker, and while I've made some short documentaries and actually a web series called Girl Aspiring, I am now embarking on my very first feature doc. So there are a lot of great filmmaking resources out there, but none of them really kind of put everything together and, describe in detail what it actually looks like to make a feature documentary. So in each weekly installment of my doc journey, I'll be revealing every step I'm taking toward this goal. And every time I fail horribly and faceplant in the mud, you will hear about that too. This actually has already happened to me once, but it turned out okay. I'll tell you later the story. But for now, I'll kind of explain a little bit more about the show. So along the way, I'll be talking about how I actually got to this point where I feel confident enough to even start this journey. If you're like me, I would consider myself a perfectionist, but I think that's not a good thing. I think perfectionism is really just insecurity in disguise. I can't finish this or show this to the world because it's not perfect, aka I'm just worried that somebody will criticize what I made, which is going to happen no matter what. I mean, you just have to listen to any stories from famous artists or celebrities to know that everybody isn't going to like what you do. Some people are going to hate what you do. And in the world of social media that we live in today, some people are going to be very vocally opposed to you. They're going to be shitheads and say crappy things. So, don't hide behind perfectionism. Just get out there and do it. That being said, there's a lot to learn before you get out and start making a documentary. And I took a very, very long time to do this, like 12 years to do this, and it doesn't need to take that long. But hopefully through this podcast and some of the blogs that I'm going to be writing, you can, get ready to be ready to start making your film within the year, hopefully, no matter where you're starting from. So the thing is, if you're a professional working in some industry totally unrelated to film, you may have ideas for documentary films, for information that the public, that the world needs to know about. And I happen to think that documentary films are the best way to make this happen. So I want to encourage more people to do this. I was a biologist. I felt like I had something to say that, the world needed to hear. Yes, I have so many things to say that the world needs to hear. But just that I had learned some things. There's a huge gap between science and the public especially, but there's a gap in a lot of places. You could be a hairdresser and there could be something about hair that would be really great for the world to know. And if you have never done any sort of photography or filmmaking and you're thinking there is no way I can make a documentary film, but you kind of have this sort of motivation to do that, I'm hoping that this podcast will help you with that, no matter where you are, and not take 12 years like I did. So that's, basically what we're going to be doing here. What happened with me as I was finishing my master's degree in biology, I met another grad student in a different program, and she was making a really cool documentary film about food injustice. If you get a chance, it's called Greening the Revolution. You should check it out. If for no other reason than it inspired my journey here. It blew my mind because I was like, wait, she's just like me and she's making this awesome film. It really just kind of opened my eyes to the possibility that I could become a filmmaker. So shortly after that experience, and I ended up kind of helping her a little bit with the fundraising for her film, but I was terrible. I had no idea what I was doing, and so I wasn't that much help. But shortly after, I took a Travel Channel digital filmmaking boot camp class, and it was just 4 days of intensive learning how to shoot and edit, and I got totally hooked. I got a little Sony Handycam, and I started making short videos of everything around me. Then I joined the Peace Corps, and in February 2008, I moved to Madagascar. And this is where I became pretty obsessed with making a documentary about Madagascar. And actually, my whole focus kind of changed a little bit from being super science-focused to being more human-centered storytelling type of thing. I was there in Madagascar, and the culture is so cool there, and the people are so cool, and here's this amazing little country that's facing so many challenges, but it's so distant and obscure. Nobody really knows. Nobody really cares to a certain point. And I developed this hypothesis that if people could connect with stories about the Malagasy people through video, maybe they would care more. So, and I think this is true of people all over the world. But before I go down that is a whole rabbit hole, and I won't go there today. I'll tell you about the film I ended up deciding to make, which is the topic of my doc journey. So it's the film that I'll be making, and talking about as I go along here. Just a little bit. You've probably heard of Madagascar vanilla. It's a famous crop there, and it's crazy because it's not native to Madagascar. It's actually native to Mexico. In Mexico, there are these little bees that pollinate it. In Madagascar, there's nothing that pollinates it. So they have to pollinate it by hand, flower by flower. And this happens deep in the rainforest. And as much as we like to make fun of things that are vanilla, right? Things that are boring. This is like this crazy exotic orchid that is actually this really important crop worldwide, and it's really difficult and dangerous to grow. So I'm sort of using vanilla as a vehicle to explore the coolness of vanilla itself, but also the coolness of Madagascar culture there, the Malagasy people, and the women who farm it, because women do a lot of farming around the world and they don't get much recognition for it. And women's stories are really important to me, I think to everybody. And it's important that we talk about how women farmers are being impacted around the world. So that's the film, basically. So I'll speak in another episode about how you develop an idea for a documentary, because that's an important thing. And also learning how to tell a great story. That's been a big part of my journey. The best documentaries tell great stories. And storytelling is, the techniques of storytelling are similar across whatever medium you're using. So if you're writing, if you're using photography, if you're using video, even music, you can tell great stories, or you can tell not great stories. Okay, so here's everything that I've done so far. So the date today that I'm making this is July 11th, 2019. I would say that I really kind of started working on actual in the pre-production mode, probably back in March or April, probably April actually. And, I started by writing a proposal, sending that out to some mentors that I have, getting feedback on it, working on the proposal more. The proposal is a big deal. And if you're wondering what goes into a proposal, I would say you can go to Sundance.org or IDA, the documentary.org, the International Documentary Association, and they have their standard applications for documentary grants. And if you look on those applications, they do, Sundance especially, does a really good description of everything that they want and the different aspects of it. And we'll have an episode where we kind of go deep dive into the core application and what it goes into a proposal, but it's pretty involved and it takes a while, and you want to do a lot of revisions there to get that in the best place possible. So I got that done. I started applying to some grants. I set up a website and a Facebook page and Instagram and Twitter and all of that. I am not the best social media person, but I have been doing research to find out how to set up social media campaigns and stuff like that. And I also found a fiscal sponsor. So a fiscal sponsor is a nonprofit organization that is willing to accept donations on your behalf so that people can make tax-deductible donations. It's also important a lot of grants require you to be a nonprofit or to be sponsored by a nonprofit in order to get their grants. So setting up a fiscal sponsor is really important. I will have an episode dedicated to fiscal sponsors, but just so you know, I got my fiscal sponsorship through From the Heart Productions, which I highly, highly recommend. From the Heart Productions also has a podcast called The Art of Film Funding, hosted by Carol Lee Dean, and she also has a book that she wrote called The Art of Film Funding. And film funding is something you're going to have to figure out if you're going to be a filmmaker, if you're going to make good films. So definitely check out that book and podcast, The Art of Film Funding. And when you're ready to go, I would recommend going to From the Heart Productions for your fiscal sponsorship. Carol Lee Dean is amazing. The organization is amazing. But herein lies the big fail that I've had so far. So one of the benefits of fiscal sponsorship through them is that they have a bi-weekly funding conference call where you can, learn about raising money, and you can practice your pitch to the experts there. So I thought that I had a great elevator pitch, but it totally fell flat with these people. I could tell they were not excited about the film at all, and they even kind of didn't quite get what the film was about. And it forced me to go back to the drawing board to, talk to some of my mentors and friends and stuff and get feedback. And it was really, really hard at the time. But I can now say, that I have a better grasp on how to communicate my film to people. And that's really, really valuable. So, you're gonna fall down. And if this podcast inspires anything, hopefully it inspires you to just get back up and keep going. The other struggle has been, there were a few weeks there where I didn't have any forward movement, where not a lot was happening. I was emailing people, they weren't getting back to me, and that's really difficult. You set up this plan for how things are going to go, and you get things going, and you expect everything to be moving forward, and sometimes it just doesn't. And you can't let yourself get too down because, and I definitely think that you have to focus on one step at a time when you're talking about really anything, but definitely filmmaking. I can tell you this with science. I can tell you this with hiking. If you spend too much time looking at the peak, it's important to have those goals. But then you kind of need to forget about those goals a little bit. You need to stop looking at the peak and just look at the next step that you're going to take, because the peak is always going to look super, super far away. And it's easy to get discouraged if you're constantly like, oh my God, it's so far. I've had to remind myself of this the past few weeks when, not a lot has been going on, that I really need to just take it one step at a time. This past week, things started moving again a little bit, and that was really exciting. I got my crowdfunding campaign going. I've got a few donations coming in, and so now I'm on an upswing again. So that's really good. And with that, I will leave you with a quote by, and I don't know really how to say this guy's name, but Orison Swett Marden. And the quote says, "Success is not measured by what you accomplish, but by the opposition you have encountered and the courage with which you have maintained the struggle against overwhelming odds." Thank you guys for listening. Please let me know if you have any thoughts, any questions, any topics you would particularly like me to cover. So let me know what you want to talk about, and I want to talk about that too. Haha. Thank you again for listening. I really appreciate it, and have a great week.